Today, we're diving into a landmark case that literally redefined what cruelty means in Indian law. We're going to look at how things you might think are just petty, like hiding someone's keys or messing up their clothes, were actually powerful enough to end a marriage and change the legal landscape for good. So, let me ask you something. Hiding your husband's keys, crumbling his freshly ironed clothes, making false accusations in public, do those really sound like grounds for a divorce? I mean, on their own, maybe not, right? It just sounds like a really bad day in a failing relationship. But what if it's all part of a much bigger, more painful pattern? Well, back in 2012, this exact question landed in front of India's Supreme Court. And their answer was a huge, resounding yes. The court's decision didn't just end one marriage, it set a brand new precedent for what mental cruelty really is. So let's break down how this all went down. All right, so let's start at the beginning. We're talking about the marriage of Vishwanath and Sarla Agrawal, a union that lasted 16 years before it completely unraveled and ended up in court. You know, from the outside, they looked like they had it all figured out. They were a respected business family in Maharashtra with successful oil mills and even a petrol pump. They had 2 sons, a picture-perfect life, right? But as is so often the case, what was happening behind closed doors was a completely different story. By 1995, the marriage had totally crumbled, and that's when Vishwanath decided to file for divorce. And, like so many messy breakups, this one came down to 2 totally different versions of reality. A classic case of he said, she said. Okay, so here you can really see the 2 sides of the coin. Vishwanath claimed there was a pattern of deliberate harassment. He said Sarla would crumple his clothes, hide his keys, and even make abusive calls to his office. But Sarla's story? It was the complete opposite. She claimed her husband was the one at fault, that he was having an affair, had abandoned her, and was even keeping her away from their kids. She even alleged he assaulted her. So with these 2 totally conflicting stories, a legal battle was pretty much inevitable. And for years, the courts came back with a surprisingly consistent verdict. First up, the trial court. They dismissed his divorce petition flat out, so he appealed. The first appellate court took a look and upheld the dismissal, saying they found no proof of mental cruelty. He tried one more time, taking it to the high court. They basically said, nope, we're not getting involved here. 3 different courts, 3 rejections. You'd think that would be the end of it. And this is where things get really wild. Check out this quote. The lower court dismissed the husband's claims of harassment as just childish acts that he, get this, supposedly enjoyed. I mean, wow, that is a pretty perplexing take, and it's exactly that kind of reasoning that laid the groundwork for a stunning reversal down the line. So after getting shut down 3 times, Vishwanath took his case all the way to the top, the Supreme Court of India. And this time, things were going to be different. The highest court in the land didn't just review the old facts, it decided to re-examine the entire foundation of the case. To do that, the Supreme Court laid out 3 fundamental questions. First, what is mental cruelty really? How do we define it? Second, was the logic used by the lower courts so flawed, so out of touch with the evidence, that it could be called perverse? And finally, when you look at all the evidence, did the husband actually prove his case? And this, right here, is the heart of the matter. This is where the Supreme Court came in with a groundbreaking analysis that would send absolute shockwaves through family law in India. So the court's big move was to redefine what mental cruelty even means. They basically said, look, this isn't a simple checklist of bad behaviors. It's all about context. Whether an act is legally cruel depends on the couple's social status, their way of life, and the real-world intensity and stigma of those actions. Then, the court took apart a huge mistake the lower courts had made. They dismissed testimony from the husband's family, calling them interested parties. The Supreme Court flipped that logic on its head. They argued, wait a minute, in a private family dispute, who else is going to be a witness? Family members, they said, are the most natural witnesses, and you can't just throw out what they have to say. Now, the court turned to something even more serious. It turns out Sarla had filed 2 separate criminal cases against Vishwanath, one for bigamy and another for dowry harassment. And in the end, he was acquitted in both cases. He was found not guilty. And the court's view on this was crystal clear. It rules that filing baseless criminal cases is itself a profound form of mental cruelty. In their own words, it, quote, creates mental trauma, as no one would like to face a criminal proceeding on baseless and untruthful allegations. Using the law as a weapon like that is a cruel act.
But maybe the most damning piece of evidence was also the most public one. The wife's advocate actually took out a notice in a popular local newspaper, the Lokmat, and publicly accused her husband of being a womanizer and a drunkard, for everyone to see.
The Supreme Court's condemnation of this was absolute. They found the notice was mollified, which is legal speak for being done in bad faith, and that its clear motive was to demolish the reputation of the appellant in the society. For a man from a respected business family, this was a devastating public blow. So, with the lower court's perverse findings completely overturned, the Supreme Court granted the divorce. But the true impact of this decision extends far beyond this one couple. It left a lasting legal legacy that changed the definition of abuse in India. First off, the financial outcome. Even though the court ruled that the wife had inflicted mental cruelty, it still ordered the husband to pay 50 lakh rupees in permanent alimony. This was a nod to the family's high social standing and his ability to pay. But the case's real legacy established several key principles that are still cited today. It made it clear that mental cruelty does not require physical violence. It confirmed that publishing unproven attacks in the media is cruelty, and so is filing baseless criminal lawsuits. It also set the precedent that social status matters when you're assessing impact, and that testimony from family can't just be dismissed. By looking past the purely physical, the Supreme Court affirmed a simple but powerful truth. Not all wounds leave visible scars. And that leaves us with a provocative question for the future. If the law now recognizes these hidden wounds, what other unseen cruelties in our modern relationships might it be forced to address next?